The week's end top stories at NBR. Housing and Urban Development Ministry Chief believes in a more coordinated approach. MediaWorks Chair resigns. Investor, entrepreneur and philanthropist David LEVENE has died. And there's more coming right up. Kia ora and welcome to NBR This Week. We start with a wrap of the end of the week's top business stories for the second week of August 2021 from the authority in New Zealand business news since 1970, nbr.co.nz. Then we'll take a look back at the top NBR Today stories from the past week. I'm Paul Brennan. Thanks so much for joining us. Housing and Urban Development Ministry Chief Executive Andrew Crisp believes government agencies and industry need to take a more coordinated approach to solve the housing crisis. During a panel discussion on housing at the Master Builders Constructive Conference in Wellington today, Crisp said that taking a fragmented approach to the housing market had been one of 5 things the country had done wrong. As well, it had not built enough houses, it had poor planning, particularly around infrastructure, housing had been treated as a commodity rather than as a right, and a one-size-fits-all approach had been taken, rather recognising housing markets around the country were different. He said everyone deserved to live in a secure, warm and dry house, whether they owned it or rented it, yet too many people have lived in substandard housing or were homeless. The Electricity Authority will investigate system operator TRANSPOWER'S immediate messages and actions leading up to Monday night's excessive blackouts before broadening its probe to systemic issues. The authority, which regulates the country's electricity industry, on Friday announced a 2-stage review of events on August 9th. It comes less than a day after power retailing Minnow, Electric Kiwi and boutique energy trader Haast Energy Trading filed a formal complaint with the WATCHDOG against listed gentailers Genesis Energy and Contact Energy, alleging market manipulation contributed to Monday night's power outages. MediaWorks Chair Jack Matthews has resigned with immediate effect in the wake of a damning report into cultural issues at the radio and outdoor advertising company. Matthews, who has chaired the company for almost 5 years, said it was clear from the review led by Maria Dew QC that there were systemic, long-standing cultural issues that need to be urgently and proactively addressed. He said the company needed to bring in new leadership with a fresh perspective on the challenges it faces and the issues identified by Dew. The MediaWorks Independent Review Workplace Culture Report, released on August 4th, outlined a litany of sexist, racist and other poor behaviour that festered at the company. NZX-listed Colonial Motor Company has reaped a record profit as COVID's impact to the new vehicle supply chain endures. The Wellington-based company recorded a $27.9 million profit in the year to June 30, up 61% year-on-year and up nearly 20% on its previous record year in 2018. Colonial Motor Group also recorded $901 million in revenues, largely driven by vehicle sales. It owns 12 motor vehicle dealerships nationwide, whose primary focus is on Ford vehicles, although 7 of those also hold a Mazda franchise. It also has dealerships selling heavy-duty trucks and tractors in Southland. Sir David LEVENE, investor, entrepreneur and philanthropist, died peacefully at his home on Wednesday. He was 91. The NBR lister became a household name with LEVENE's paint and homewares chain, although he sold the business in 1994 to Skellerup. He then changed the company's name to Lewis Holdings after his father Lewis, who emigrated to New Zealand from England in the 1920s, and turned his attention to venture capital investment, backing dozens of companies in a range of sectors. One of his recent favourites was Reefton Distilling Company, in which Lewis Holdings has a 7% stake. LEVENE's father had wound up on the west coast at Ruatapu after landing in Wellington, and as a boy LEVENE visited Reefton with his mother during school holidays. Those are our top stories as we head into the weekend, the full versions of which, along with all our breaking business news, columns and opinion, are at nbr.co.nz right now. You're watching NBR This Week. A brief look back now at the week's top stories from our daily news brief program, NBR Today. On Monday, a major announcement from Auckland International Airport. Auckland Airport has announced it will build a new $1 billion plus domestic hub facility attached to the eastern end of the existing international terminal. The NZX-listed company said preparation would begin early next year on the project to move jet flights arriving and departing via Auckland to major New Zealand towns and cities into a new domestic hub. The domestic hub will initially accommodate jet operations, aircraft flying to the main centres, while regional services would continue operating from the existing domestic terminal building and move across to the main terminal building later. The new domestic operation will be about 3 times the size of the current domestic terminal when accounting for shared kiosk-based check-in for both international and domestic travellers. The airport will also spend about $200 million on a new transport hub with upgraded pedestrian, transport links and car parking. It's NBR This Week, the week's top stories from our daily video business news bulletin, NBR Today. From Tuesday, calls for an independent review of rolling power blackouts. Calls for an independent review of Monday night's rolling blackouts are already being made as grid operator TransPower puts New Zealand's generators on notice over energy shortage risks early this evening, and the government seeks answers. TransPower this morning issued a customer advice notice advising there would be insufficient generation nationwide for 2 hours from 5:30 p.m, and warnings or grid emergency notices should be issued if system conditions worsened. The grid operator expects to operate the system more comfortably tonight, with demand set to peak at about 6,700 megawatts, some 400 megawatts less than last night's record level of load. This is NBR This Week, the past week's top 5 business stories from NBR Today. From Wednesday, ASB reports a big increase in cash net profit. ASB has reported a 34% increase in cash net profit on the back of significantly lower bad debt provisions as the economy continues to recover from COVID-19. The bank has delivered a cash net profit after tax of $1.295 billion for the year to June, up from $965 million in 2020. Joining NBR's Maria Slade was ASB CEO Victoria Short.
Our lending to Kiwi businesses increased by 9%, and that's in context of market lending that went backwards by 1.5%. So that's quite a big difference in our results. We've talked a lot about the home loan market too, of course, and so there we've seen an increase in 12% lending for home purposes, and that's in line with the market performance.
ASB CEO Victoria Short with Maria Slade there. It's NBR This Week, the top business stories from our daily video news bulletin, NBR Today. From Thursday, secret multi-million-dollar settlements paid to liquidators. Secret multi-million-dollar settlements paid to liquidators of failed developer Property Ventures have been revealed in documents sent to NBR. After Dave Henderson's Property Ventures collapsed in 2010, owing $68.2 million to secured creditors, according to receivers' reports at the time, liquidators filed legal action in 2012 against 9 defendants, including its former directors and auditor PwC. The lawsuit, financed by litigation funding from LPF Group, claimed compensation of $302.7 million and concluded in early 2018 after the claim against PwC was settled in 2017. Figures released in relation to subsequent litigation show total settlements received by the liquidator from 2010 to March 2021 were $39.7 million, not including repayment of security for costs. How much of that was paid by PwC is not clear, but the total sum is considerably less than the amount claimed. This is NBR This Week. Now we're up to Friday's top story. After flatlining in 2020 due to COVID, median director fees had their sharpest annual rise in 7 years, while directors are spending less time on board matters than they did in 2019. The annual Institute of Directors and EY Directors Fee Report, which surveyed 571 directors holding 1,768 directorships across 1,039 organisations, found the overall median annual fee for non-executive directors rose 7.1% to $50,000. In the 6 years before 2020, fees for this director type moved up about 2 to 2.5% a year. The report out today also found that median fees for non-executive chairs rose 7.9% to $64,750 in the 12 months to April 30, 2021. You've been watching our review of the week's top 5 NBR Today stories. You can find the full versions of those stories and more, along with all our daily breaking business news, columns and opinion at nbr.co.nz right now. Saturday at NBR, in Fact or Fiction, Brent Edwards and Grant Walker debate the week in politics, while on Sunday, Neville Gibson looks at Elon Musk's high-wire gamble. I'm Paul Brennan. Thanks for watching NBR This Week. Have a great weekend. I look forward to being with you again from Monday for NBR Today.